In the application for this module, I ultimately want to build a form that allows a user to fill out information about themselves. So I want them to be able to tell me their favorite color, their preferred username, some biographical information, and some of this information will have validation rules that we want to apply. Right now, there's just a very simple form with a single input so far. It's a place where the user can enter their preferred username. And back here in my HTML, you can see I already have a form in place. I have an input type equals text. And this is a good starting point for us to review some of the things about how Angular works. Notice this view has a controller in charge. It's the edit profile controller. It's exposing itself as model, and that means, if I take a quick look at the edit profile controller, that anything that is attached to the controller instance is available for binding. So the first thing that is attached to the edit profile controller is this user model. This is the object that I want to contain all the information that is in the form, the favorite color, the biographical information, the username, and there's also a submit method. When the user clicks on the submit button for the form, this is the method that I want to invoke. Typically, this is where you would take your model and send it back to the web server and then save it in a database. But to keep things very simple for this application, when the user submits the form, I'm simply going to use the location service to jump over to the results route. And the results route is going to take the same user information and just dump it out into a page. And we can look at that information and be sure that what the user entered into the form is actually making it into the model object. How can the edit profile controller and the controller that is in charge of results both see the same user information? That's very simple because I have that user model defined as a service. This is the factory method for that user service. It's just going to return the model object that I need. It has properties available for me to bind the username and the email and the website and the favorite color and so forth. So I just need to inject user anywhere I need it, and I'm getting a single object because services in Angular are singletons. And then I just need to set up to bind the inputs of my form against properties of this user model. And I can do that using directives that you're probably familiar with in Angular, like ngModel. I can say that this input should bind against model.user.username, and that establishes the two-way data binding that Angular is famous for. Anytime the user types into this input, those changes will be pushed into that expression, so it will set the username. And if for some reason the JavaScript code changes username behind the scenes, those changes will be propagated into this input. I can also use another directive, which is ngSubmit, to say that when the user submits this form, please call that submit method that we saw on the controller instance, and that will send me over to the results page. Let's try that out real quick. If I save this file, do a refresh, type in some username, and submit, I end up on my results view where I'm just dumping that user object into JSON, but I can see that I did successfully set the username there. And those are some of the basics that everyone pretty much knows about Angular. You can use ngSubmit and ngModel. But what's not immediately obvious to a lot of people, particularly if you're just starting with Angular, is that Angular has a directive register that will tap into the form tag in HTML. So anytime you have a form on the page, there's a directive with a linking function that attaches some behavior to that form. And specifically, one of the things Angular will do when you have a form is that Angular will build a data structure that contains information about that form. For instance, is it dirty? Is it valid? What errors are inside of the form? And if I want to see that data structure, all I need to do is give this form a name. And what Angular will do is take that data structure about this form and attach it to the scope using this name. If I wanted to attach it to my controller instance, I could say model.profileForm, and Angular would attach that to my controller, which is aliased as model. But in most cases, I don't want the controller to know anything about that data structure about the form. I just want it to be available. And let's come down here in a column that will appear to the right of all my form inputs. I just want to take this profile form and dump it out as JSON so we can see it. So let me save everything and refresh this page. And now I can see that data structure. It has no errors. Its name was profile form. It's not dirty, it's pristine. It's valid, not invalid. And the user hasn't submitted this form as yet. If I start typing information into this text box, you'll see some of those values change. Specifically, this form is now dirty and not pristine. Now, although this data structure is useful, it's even more useful if I can attach information about each of my inputs into that data structure, which I can do. Any input that has an ngModel directive, if I also give it a name, Angular will also give me information about this input as a username property on that data structure. So let me save this file again and refresh. And now I can see that in addition to information about my form, I now also have information about the username input. I can see that it has not been touched, that it's pristine, that it's not dirty. And if I type into it, I can see things start to change, like the view value and the model value. And all the information that is inside of this data structure, ultimately what we want to do is take advantage of this information to drive the user experience, to show validation warnings, to hide validation warnings. But before we get there, let me show you what the whole form looks like. If I uncomment some HTML that I have here, then I just want to show you that I already have input set up and bound with the ngModel to gather the user's email address, their websiting, their favorite color, and all sorts of information. Let's take a quick look at this in the page. And I can see the form is quite difficult to use. Let me try to fill out some basic information. Maybe even pick my favorite color. Say that I'm a professional and I accept these terms and submit this. All along, you can see information in the data structure changing. But this all works. I can bind each of those inputs to something that is in my model. Unfortunately, this doesn't look good or behave well. If I take out my email address, currently, I'm getting the native browser validation messages here. Please fill out this field. That's from Chrome. So let's just try to address the looks of this form first. I'm not particularly happy about the way it appears. We'll try to fix that in the next clip.